I'm joined here with Dr. James Hoffman from Renaissance Periodization, and he is known as a recovery guy. So he'll be speaking today on his presentation, which was on physique, balancing physique and lifestyle. And I found it very interesting to see the different levels of from pro right down to different levels there. And I found it to be it's good to understand where people are at in their physique and their training performance sort of goals, and I'll let James summarize what he spoke about now. So thank you.
Thanks. It was really great to be here, and it's really interesting because everybody wants to be kind of towards their best in all sport, and with physique it's like something where you might not compete, but we all want to have a nice physique. We all want to look good, whether it's naked or whatever, but we want to have a nice physique. The problem is the physique training, the diet, the recovery stuff, it's just all consuming. It just takes up all of your time, and it just gets really frustrating for some people. So my talk is really about understanding the trade-offs between how deep you want to go into physique and how much of your lifestyle you have to compromise along the way. So we kind of broke it down into some different categories, right? Like one being a professional level physique competitor. And we say, yeah, you know what? Like, you have to be on point all the time. You don't get a break. Your training, your nutrition, all that stuff, all the time. But you don't have to live like that if you're not an active competitor or somebody who's trying to win titles and sponsorship and things like that. So we can work our way down and say, hey, you might have somebody who's, we call them kind of the professional, where you're trying to win competitions, but it's not your whole life. Maybe you got a job, maybe you got other stuff going on. And we kind of think about what things can we give up a little bit in terms of physique development to maintain a good balance in lifestyle. And then we can work our way down even further. We say, okay, you have people who are kind of recreational and non-competitive. They just want to look good. They want to have a good life, but they're not necessarily going to step on a bodybuilding stage anytime soon. And they're a little bit more flexible. They can be a little bit looser with their diet, a little looser with their training, but still maintain a pretty good regimen most of the year. And then you kind of have your recreational people who just want to be fit and healthy and look good, and maybe they got other hobbies, so they don't want to be weighing their food, doing all their macros all the time, maybe a little bit of the time, but maybe not all the time either.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to know as well that people might go through waves of being a level 1 or level 2 or level 3.
Yes.
And how have you found that with coaching over the years and taking people from different levels, either regressing them or progressing? Have you found it to be difficult, or?
Yeah, sometimes it's more of a matter of necessity, where people will start at like trying to become professional, and then something happens, like they might have a death in the family, they might have unexpected financial problems where maybe they lost their job or something like that, and then they have to either back off, which is more often what we see. It's rare that we see somebody who's like, oh, I won the lottery, so now I want to be Mr. Olympia, right? Exactly. It's usually like, hey, I broke up with my spouse, or I got a divorce, or my sister died and I have to take care of my family, or something like that. And then they go from like a 2 or down to like a 3 or a 4, and they say, I was training really hard, I was doing everything right, and now I just can't anymore because there's more important things going on in my life. And so one of the things we try to tell them is like, that's perfectly okay, there's no shame, there's no, you shouldn't feel bad about having to downgrade, because you just have different priorities in life, right? And so it's just a matter of trade-offs where we say, yeah, you can't be Mr. Olympia or Miss, any of the other titles right now, and you might get there someday, but you just got other stuff going on. And so you can't just be penny pinching your macros and doing training all the time. You got a job, you got a family to take care of. That's fine. Now, in the event, sometimes people do want to move up, and they say, hey, my life is actually like really good, really stable. I was basically a recreational person, and I want to kind of dip into the competitive level a little bit. And then we say, okay, that's great. Now just understand where you were kind of loose and not so tidy on things. Now you got to like start getting more rigid and get more strict. And for a lot of people, that's a big shift, right? Where it's like, oh, I used to go out once a week for dinner, and now you say, yeah, you probably can't do that most of the time.
And where do you find the mental side of things when it comes to this as well? Like, do you find that people respond well in most cases, or would you say they need to have a very deep talk with their coach?
I think some guidance with the coach is good, but I think the big dialogue is the internal one, right? Where you say, like, what is realistic for me to do right now? Can I actually put in the time and effort to step on stage or to be the best me? And a lot of the times the answer is no. And coming to terms with that and understanding, like, that's okay. My whole life doesn't revolve around physique training necessarily all the time. And so I think the first one is kind of getting them to recognize, like, what do you actually want to get out of this right now? What do you think you can reasonably accomplish? And then they come back to the coach and say, like, okay, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and then you can give them feedback and help guide them along the way. But the problem that we get a lot on the mental side is they don't actually understand what they want, or they don't understand the trade-offs it's going to take to get there. And that's when having a coach can help guide as well and say, hey, look, like, you want to be Mr. Olympia or you want to be the next Dana Lynn Bailey, like, it's going to take a lot. Like, you're going to be training 3 hours a day. You're going to be like doing all your meal preps all the time, and just getting them to understand that.
Yeah. I guess my final question on this then, and it's actually really good to end with the possibility of training 3 hours per day. Let's say you have someone that has, for most of their life, say they're in their 20s, they don't have kids yet, and they've got on stage before and they've actually done quite well. Say the circumstances change, where we use the example of they have kids, they have a more stressful job. If they cannot commit to the 3 hours a day, we're looking at 50. What training strategies have you come up with or thought of that could actually help them to still achieve, maybe not 100% level, but we'll say 95 in this context, around their actual individual training sessions, and maybe they might only able to do, say, an hour and a half or 2 hours per day. So what's that, a 30% drop? But are there any things within training that you could, with, say, supersetting, that sort of thing, could that help?
Yeah,
or?
There are some things, and this is something we have actually talked about recently on one of our webinars. And so if time is the biggest constrictor, then you have to use time-saving strategies, and that's when those intensification techniques like using supersets or giant sets or like antagonist-style supersets can be really handy. So normally when we're dealing with somebody and time is not the limiting factor, right? We say, like, you have all the time in the world to train. We would say, yeah, you probably don't want to do that just because you'll get a little bit of an edge not doing it, at least on the individual muscle groups you're training. But in that situation, you have somebody that's like, I can't do 3 hours. So what do you got to do? Well, you got to make the most of the time you have. And that's when using like antagonist supersetting and those kind of intensification techniques can be really useful. And again, like we're big on like the volume landmarks, so we still say, hey, you might not be at your absolute best, but try to hit your MEVs, your MAVs, your MRVs, all of those things to the best of your ability.
Yep. I guess with that too, that might lower their stress, knowing they don't have to go for that 3 hours, and that actually could have a more of a positive impact, for at least for the long term.
Yeah, like a liberating effect. Like, yeah, actually I don't have to do that. I can do like a really good 1.5, maybe 2 hours if I get lucky, and I'm still going to be in pretty good shape.
Yep, that's right. Well, James, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
It's awesome, and look forward to dinner tonight. We can chat more.